From the earliest age I could remember, my mother had instilled in me a chilling, unshakable belief. The father of my best friend, Brian, was not just a bad person, but an actual monster. Her words weren't merely warnings, they were pronouncements, etched into my young mind, painting a vivid, terrifying portrait of a man I had never truly met. So, when the stark, undeniable truth finally crashed over me, a revelation that shattered every preconceived notion, I rushed to confront her, hoping she would see the light, too. Instead, her reaction was a visceral, desperate attempt to stifle my burgeoning voice, to sweep the uncomfortable facts under a rug, and to physically distance us from the unsettling reality. It felt as if she was trying to brick me into a wall of ignorance. But once the seed of doubt was planted, once I had a glimpse behind the carefully constructed facade, I couldn't just let it go. My curiosity, ignited by her fervent resistance, transformed into an insatiable drive. What else was she hiding? What dark currents flowed beneath the placid surface of our lives? I plunged headfirst into a clandestine investigation, sifting through fragments of information like a detective piecing together a shattered mosaic. What I ultimately unearthed was a secret so profoundly disturbing, so utterly twisted, that its chilling tendrils coiled around my very soul, destined to haunt my memories forever. I was barely 12 years old, navigating the awkward social labyrinth of middle school, when Brian first appeared in our classroom. He cut an imposing figure, tall for his age, with an athletic build that spoke of innate prowess on the sports field. By all conventional measures, he should have been an instant magnet for popularity, the kind of kid everyone wanted to befriend, admire, or emulate. Yet, the moment he crossed the threshold, an almost palpable chill descended upon the room, stifling the usual midday chatter. The entire class collectively froze, their faces draining of color, turning a uniform, eerie ghost white, as if they had just witnessed a specter. Even Mrs. Squelch, typically unflappable and composed, seemed to visibly blanch, her knuckles tightening around the chalk. It was an unsettling, bewildering tableau, and I, clearly, was the only one utterly oblivious to the unspoken terror that had gripped them all. Regardless of the classroom's strange reaction driven by either naive courage or sheer lack of understanding, I decided to sit down next to him during lunch. An immediate, almost comedic, silence fell over the cafeteria, as if every pair of eyes was suddenly glued to our table. Everyone, including Brian himself, gave me a look that was a peculiar blend of shock, pity, and outright bewilderment. "You actually want to be my friend?" he stammered, his voice laced with such genuine surprise that it was heartbreaking. We spent the rest of that day together, laughing and sharing stories, having an absolute blast. I hadn't had any real friends at the time, so I went home that afternoon practically vibrating with excitement, eager to tell my mom about the wonderful new companion I had made. But when I breathlessly recounted his name, the warmth instantly drained from her face, leaving it ashen and drawn. Her eyes, usually so kind, hardened into cold steel. "Stay away from that kid," she commanded, her voice low and menacing. "Him and his dad are monsters. They hit and hospitalized their own mom." The word struck me like a physical blow, leaving me utterly shocked and disbelieving. The very next morning, a clear signal of her unwavering resolve, Mom drove me to school herself, instead of allowing me my usual walk. She didn't just drop me off, she marched directly into the school building, her stride purposeful and grim. I watched her approach my teacher, Mrs. Squelch, and lean in to whisper something intensely private, something that made Mrs. Squelch nod grimly, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. Later, when I instinctively tried to sit near Brian in class, Mrs. Squelch, with a firmness that allowed no argument, immediately moved my assigned seat to the opposite side of the room. I risked a glance at Brian from across the chasm of desks, and my heart sank as I saw him, head bowed, shoulders trembling, clearly struggling to hold back tears. During recess, while the other children chased each other across the playground, a vibrant tapestry of shouts and laughter, Brian stood utterly alone, a solitary figure by the chain-link fence. A stark picture of isolation. And after school, the reason for his ostracization became painfully clear. The moment Brian's dad's car, an older model sedan, pulled into the pickup area, the entire space seemed to ripple with an invisible force of repulsion. Parents, who minutes before had been chatting amiably, suddenly grabbed their children's hands, their expressions shifting to a mix of fear and disgust, and speed-walked them to their cars, creating an instantaneous, gaping void around the vehicle. I distinctly heard one mom hiss, "Don't look at him, sweetie," to her wide-eyed daughter, pulling the child's head away as if Brian's dad were a toxic anomaly. Brian's dad himself just sat there, slumped slightly, his head down, a figure of profound shame, as Brian quietly climbed into the car. Everyone treated them as if they were undeniably awful, irredeemably bad people, yet in my young mind, it simply didn't add up. How could this be? Brian's dad was the one who consistently packed Brian extra granola bars, specifically for kids who'd forgotten their lunch money, ensuring no one went hungry. And Brian, a genuinely kind and empathetic boy, voluntarily stayed after school, sacrificing his free time to tutor special needs kids, displaying an endless patience. There was just no conceivable way this was the family. These were the individuals who had supposedly violently assaulted their own mother. Then came the pivotal day, the moment the carefully constructed facade of lies began to crack, and I realized who Brian and his father truly were. I was walking home, my head down, diligently counting the crisp $50 bill my grandma had given me for my birthday, a fortune in my 12-year-old eyes, when suddenly, 3 hulking 8th graders materialized, surrounding me in a menacing semicircle. Look at the rich boy, the biggest one sneered, his voice dripping with contempt, before roughly shoving me to the ground. My precious money was snatched away, and then a brutal kick landed squarely in my ribs. I curled up instantly, bracing myself for more blows, for the inevitable humiliation, when abruptly, the taunts and shoves ceased. A sudden, chaotic scramble ensued, and the bullies scattered like startled pigeons. I cautiously looked up. Brian's dad stood there, not a hand laid on anyone, just standing, a silent, imposing presence that had somehow compelled their retreat. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his voice gentle despite his formidable presence, before extending a hand and helping me to my feet. He walked me all the way home, a protective shadow, without saying much else, his silence strangely comforting. When I recounted the terrifying ordeal to my mom, she didn't just get upset. She completely lost it, transforming into a tempest of fury and fear. "He approached you, that monster approached you," she shrieked, her voice escalating with each question. "What if he'd taken you somewhere? What if he'd hurt you?" She didn't even wait for my answers. The phone was in her hand instantly, and she was dialing the school, her words a furious torrent. A known abuser confronted my son. On school property, she kept repeating, her voice vibrating with outrage. By the next day, the entire school knew. The principal, clearly swayed by mom's impassioned and likely embellished account, sent out an email banning Brian's dad from all school property, effectively labeling him a danger. Parents, already primed with prejudice, shared the email far and wide on Facebook, adding their own inflammatory comments, publicly denouncing him as a predator who lurked around children. At school, Brian looked utterly destroyed. He spent most of the day with his head buried on his desk, his usually bright demeanor replaced by an unbearable burden of shame and sorrow. When I tried to discreetly slip him a note, scrawled with a simple "thanks for your dad helping me," he pushed it back, his eyes still downcast. "Please don't," he whispered, his voice barely audible, raw with pain. "You're just making things worse for him." 2 weeks later, I found Brian in the library, his small frame hunched over a book, his shoulders visibly shaking. He was trying to hide his tears, but the effort was futile. Without a word, I sat down next to him. They spray-painted Predator on his car. He choked out, his voice thick with anguish, the words barely escaping his trembling lips. He lost his job because of it. We might lose our apartment. He wiped his eyes hard with the back of his hand, a futile attempt to stem the flow. Everyone hates him, but they don't know anything. They don't know the truth. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a sudden chill creeping down my spine. Brian looked around furtively, his eyes darting from side to side, making sure we were completely alone in the quiet expanse of the library. Then, he dropped the bomb, a revelation that shattered my perception of reality. "Turns out him and his dad never hit their mom," he began, his voice gaining a desperate, defiant edge. "In fact, it was the other way around. She hit them." He spoke of her rage, the terrifying outbursts. She'd throw bottles, smash pens, plates, use lighters. Brian still has a burn mark on his back from that, a permanent scar from her violence. "Then why?" I asked, utterly bewildered. "Why was your dad blamed? Why does everyone believe he's the guilty one?" That's when he completely broke down, the dam holding back his pain finally bursting, torrents of tears streaming down his face. He revealed a dark secret, a twisted leverage his mom had held over them for years. This mom, he sobbed, his voice ragged, on top of hitting them, she always threatened his dad, saying if he ever left and took me, then she'd tell everyone dad was the abuser. She would destroy his life. My face went utterly pale, a sudden, horrifying clarity dawning on me. "And that's what she did," Brian said, his voice raw with a grief far too profound for a child his age. "When dad finally took me and we left, when he tried to escape her abuse, she went to court and lied about everything. She painted him as the villain. But why does everyone just accept it? Why does everyone say you're guilty?" I pressed, my mind reeling. "Because they're all idiots who can't even do a Google search," he exclaimed, a flash of righteous anger momentarily overriding his sorrow. He then pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling slightly, and showed me something that utterly changed everything I had ever believed about them, tearing down the wall of lies that had been constructed around their lives. He showed me screenshots of official police reports, meticulously detailed court documents, and undeniable medical records. There were chilling photos of bruises on his dad's arms, irrefutable evidence of physical abuse. He showed me a hospital report from when his mom had thrown a glass bottle at his dad's head, an act of violence that could have been fatal. And perhaps most tragically, he showed me multiple restraining order applications his dad had filed over the years, only to withdraw them, presumably out of fear of his ex-wife's threats and the inevitable backlash. The dates on these documents went back years, painting a harrowing history of suffering. Brian scrolled through photo after photo, each one a fresh stab to my gut, making my stomach churn with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and profound sorrow. Driven by a surge of desperate urgency, I grabbed his phone, my hands shaking, and started taking pictures with mine, determined to expose the truth. Brian tried to stop me, a frantic look in his eyes, but I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "People need to see this," I insisted, my voice laced with conviction. "They need to know the truth." But Brian snatched his phone back, his movements sharp and panicked. "No," he cried, his voice tight with a fear I couldn't comprehend. "You don't get it. She make it worse. She always does." The bell, an unwelcome intruder, suddenly rang, signaling the end of lunch and forcing us to go to class. I couldn't concentrate on anything for the rest of the day. Every time I looked at Brian, hunched over his desk, a silent testament to his immense pain, I thought about those horrifying photos. About his dad sitting in his car with predators spray painted across it, a grotesque defamation. I thought about how everyone, including my own mom, had so readily, so cruelly believed the lie. After school, Mom was waiting in the pickup line, her expression tense and impatient. She barely let me get into the car before starting, her voice sharp with accusation. I heard you were talking to that Brian kid in the library. What? Did I ever tell you about that whole messy situation? Mom, you just don't grasp the nuances, the complexities of it all. There's simply no room for debate, no space for discussion. You are to steer clear of him, absolutely, irrevocably. Her knuckles, stark white against the dark leather, betrayed the coiled tension as her grip tightened on the steering wheel. His father is a dangerous man, she declared, her voice low but laced with steel. The entire community, every single person who matters, is acutely aware of his reputation, his history. But what if, just what if, all those whispered rumors, all that collective judgment, had somehow gone astray? What if their perceptions were fundamentally flawed? A sudden surge of defiance, or perhaps just a desperate hope, spurred me to action. My fingers instinctively sought the familiar weight of my phone in my pocket. What if I pressed, my voice gaining a tremor of conviction? What if I could actually show you, Mom? What if I could provide undeniable proof that contradicts everything you believe? Without warning, Mom slammed on the brakes, the car lurching violently as we screeched to a halt at a suddenly unforgiving red light. Her head whipped around, her eyes pinning me with an icy glare that promised no quarter. Whatever sob story, whatever fabricated tale they've spun for you, she spat, her voice tight with suppressed fury. I have absolutely no desire to hear a single word of it. It's a classic manipulation tactic, you know? Abusers, without fail, invariably present themselves as the injured party, the innocent victims. Always, without exception, the final word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. The moment we stepped through the front door, the suffocating silence of the car ride still lingering, I bypassed any further confrontation. My path was direct and purposeful, straight to my room, where the glow of my computer screen became an immediate beacon. I plunged headfirst into online research, a digital detective on a mission. It wasn't long before I unearthed the court case, a trove of public records laid bare. Initially, it seemed straightforward. Brian's mother had indeed been granted full custody. But then, a crucial detail emerged, a crack in the narrative. Brian, upon turning 12, a pivotal age of choice, had actively decided to move in with his father. And it was precisely then, on the heels of that decision, that his mother had lodged the abuse claims. The chronology, the stark correlation between his choice and her accusations, immediately pricked at my instincts. The timing, to put it mildly, felt deeply, profoundly suspicious. With a growing sense of purpose, I opened a new document on my computer, meticulously beginning to organize every scrap of information I'd gathered. This wasn't just idle curiosity. I was building a counter-narrative, a coherent case. I carefully cataloged the photographs Brian had shown me on his phone, the ones he insisted were authentic. Alongside them, I constructed a detailed court timeline, mapping out the legal proceedings. And then there was the most damning detail, or rather, the most telling absence of one, the unequivocal fact that Brian's dad had never, not once, actually been convicted of any wrongdoing. He had only ever been accused a crucial distinction, I felt, that had been deliberately obscured. Lost in the labyrinthine details of the case, my mind fully immersed in the intricate web of dates and testimonies, I barely registered the soft click of the door. Then, Mom's voice, sharp and laced with an unexpected edge, sliced through the quiet. "What exactly are you doing in here?" she demanded. My fingers, as if by instinct, flew across the keyboard, minimizing the offending window with lightning speed. "Homework," I replied, my voice, I hoped, sounding convincingly nonchalant, even as a bead of sweat traced a path down my temple. The ruse was momentary, futile. Without a word, she strode purposefully across the room, her silhouette eclipsing the light from the hallway. Her hand moved decisively, reopening the minimized window with an almost surgical precision. In a chilling tableau, her face transformed before my very eyes, a fleeting flicker of confusion quickly hardening into an incandescent fury. "You actually took pictures of their fake evidence," she hissed, her voice barely contained. "Are you completely out of your mind? Are you insane?" My own desperation surged. "It's not fake, Mom. Just look at the dates. The discrepancies are right there." But she wasn't listening. "Delete it now," she commanded, her voice rising to a dangerous crescendo. My hesitation, a mere fraction of a second, was all the permission she needed. Her hand shot out, snatching my phone from my grasp with a surprising force. "I'm keeping this," she announced, her tone chillingly calm now, "until you demonstrate that you've learned to make significantly better choices regarding your associations." Her eyes narrowed, drilling into mine. "And you, young man, are grounded. Absolutely no computer access whatsoever, except strictly for homework, and I'll be meticulously checking your browsing history, rest assured." The ensuing days stretched into an agonizing blur, each one a fresh form of torture. At school, every attempt I made to discreetly slip Brian a note, a lifeline of communication, was thwarted. Teachers, seemingly possessed by an uncanny vigilance, materialized out of nowhere to separate us, their expressions tight with a disapproval I couldn't quite decipher. But the true agony lay in the insidious whispers. As I walked down the hallways, navigating the gauntlet of lockers and averted gazes, I could feel the ripple effect. "That's the kid," I distinctly overheard someone murmur, the words laced with a venomous judgment, "the one who associates with the abuser's son." It was a scarlet letter, publicly branded. And deterred by my home restrictions, a new strategy began to form. During lunch, when the cafeteria buzzed with heedless chatter, I sought refuge in the quiet confines of the school library. Mrs. Chen, the librarian, a woman whose attention typically drifted as long as silence was maintained, provided the perfect cover. There, shielded by rows of dusty tomes, I delved even deeper into public records, meticulously tracing every available thread. What I uncovered about Brian's mother, a woman named Catherine, was astonishing. Her past was far from pristine. It was, in fact, remarkably turbulent. Public documents revealed not one, but two previous restraining orders filed against her by different ex-boyfriends. There was even a record of an arrest for assault stemming from an altercation at a bar. And a truly damning detail, all of these incidents, these patterns of volatile behavior, had occurred before she had even met Brian's father, before their contentious relationship had ever begun. It painted a very different picture, didn't it? My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as the printer whirred, spitting out page after page of incriminating evidence. Just as the last sheet dropped into the tray, a sharp, deliberate throat clearing shattered the library's quietude. I froze. Slowly, I turned, my stomach clenching. There, arms tightly crossed over her chest like a sentinel guarding a secret, stood Mrs. Patterson, the school's most notoriously nosy parent volunteer. Her gaze was scrutinizing, piercing. "Shouldn't you be out at lunch right now?" she inquired, her tone dripping with suspicion. Reacting on pure instinct, I snatched the still warm papers, crumpling them hastily before stuffing them deep into my backpack. Just finishing up some homework, I mumbled, trying to project an air of casual innocence, though I felt anything but. The ominous summons came that afternoon, pulling me from the supposed sanctuary of my English class. My heart sank as I was directed to the principal's office, a place that always reeked of trouble. And there she was, Mom, seated stiffly, her posture radiating controlled fury. Beside her, a picture of self-righteous triumph, sat Mrs. Patterson, a smug, satisfied smirk playing on her lips. Principal Morrison, his expression grim and unyielding, held up the very pages I had so frantically tried to conceal. "Care to offer an explanation?" he began, his voice devoid of warmth. "As to why you were conducting research on restraining orders during school hours?" Mom's face was utterly unreadable. "A mask of stone. We'll discuss this," she stated, her voice dangerously quiet. At home. The drive home was an oppressive vacuum of silence, each mile stretching taut with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Not a single word was exchanged until the moment our car finally pulled into the familiar confines of our driveway. And then, the dam burst. Mom exploded, her voice a torrent of incandescent rage. "Mrs. Patterson told me everything," she shrieked, her words a furious accusation. "You're absolutely obsessed with defending these people. What on earth is wrong with you?" The question, hurled with such venom, ignited my own pent-up fury. "What's wrong with me?" I roared back, my voice cracking with indignation. "What's wrong with everyone else? You're actively destroying an innocent family, shattering their lives, all because you're too willfully stubborn, too intellectually dishonest, to even look at the overwhelming evidence staring you in the face." Her eyes flashed, incandescent. "Go to your room immediately. And let me make this abundantly clear. You are not to leave this house, not for anything save for attending school, until you manage to get your head completely straight." Consumed by a swirling vortex of anger and injustice, I stomped up the stairs, each footfall a defiant statement, before slamming my bedroom door with a resounding thud that rattled the very foundations of the house. From my window, a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach as my gaze instinctively drifted across the street to Mrs. Patterson's perfectly manicured lawn, her pristine house. I could almost visualize it, her fingers flying across her phone screen, already gleefully texting the other neighborhood mothers, painting lurid tales of my concerning behavior, further solidifying my pariah status. The next day at school was a palpable descent into an even deeper circle of social hell. The subtle whispers had escalated into outright ostracization. If I dared to sit at a table in the library or the classroom, kids would visibly shift away, creating an uncomfortable void around me. My usual lunch table, a bastion of familiarity, was mysteriously full the moment I approached, forcing me to retreat. Even the teachers, who once offered encouraging smiles, now regarded me with a wary, almost pitying look. In the bustling hallway, Brian caught my eye, his own filled with a heartbreaking blend of shame and regret, and wordlessly mouthed, "I'm sorry," the weight of it all pressed down. But it also solidified my resolve. I ate my lunch that day in the desolate confines of a bathroom stall, the sterile white tiles a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. This wasn't defeat. This was strategic retreat. This was where I would meticulously plan my next move. Mom had successfully confiscated my primary means of digital communication, and research my phone was a ghost. My home computer access a distant memory. But what she wouldn't stop was my access to the vast resources available within the school's walls. This wasn't over. I just had to approach it with a newfound cunning, a level of strategic intelligence she wouldn't anticipate. Over the course of the following week, a new, covert routine began to take shape. I strategically volunteered to help various teachers after school, offering my assistance with grading papers or organizing their classrooms. The moment they stepped out, even for a brief coffee break or to take a phone call, I'd swiftly, almost imperceptibly, commandeer their computers. My quarry remained Catherine. What I uncovered painted an even more disturbing portrait. She had been fired from no fewer than 3 previous jobs, each termination explicitly cited as being due to interpersonal conflicts, and her social media presence, before it was abruptly set to private, had been a veritable digital scrapbook of vitriolic rants, seething diatribes aimed at a parade of ex-boyfriends she claimed had wronged her. A clear, unsettling pattern of blame and conflict began to emerge. A clandestine communication channel opened between Brian and me. He began leaving small, carefully folded notes tucked within the pages of specific library books, coded messages that contained devastating updates about his father's spiraling situation. Lost another job interview today. One note read, the word scrawled in a shaky hand. They Googled him. Another warned, landlord wants us out by the end of the month. But the one that truly twisted my gut simply stated, Dad won't eat. Says food should go to me. Each tiny scrap of paper was a punch to the gut, a stark, painful reminder of the very real, very human cost of these baseless accusations. With every one of Brian's heartbreaking notes, a slow, burning anger ignited within me, growing hotter, more intense. This wasn't just unfair, it was a profound injustice. I began to meticulously transcribe everything I learned, every detail, every date, every damning connection, into a small, nondescript notebook that I kept carefully concealed deep within my locker. This wasn't merely research anymore. This was a dedicated, passionate effort to construct an irrefutable case, to lay bare the truth that everyone else refused to see. Then, inevitably, the other shoe dropped. Mom discovered my after-school computer activities. Of course, it was Mrs. Patterson's daughter, a perfectly polished little tattletale who had seen me and dutifully reported back to her mother, who in turn relayed the concerning information to mine. Mom, a veritable storm of fury, appeared at school the next day, her presence demanding immediate attention. I've simply had enough, she declared to Principal Morrison, her voice ringing with indignant authority. I am deeply concerned, Principal, about the insidious influence this family is exerting over my son. He's not just questioning things, he's lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and frankly, he's obsessing over them in a manner that borders on unhealthy. Principal Morrison, ever the stoic arbiter of school policy, nodded gravely, lending an air of official weight to Mom's accusations. Indeed, Mrs. Last name, he concurred, his tone measured and serious. We too have observed certain concerning changes in his behavior recently. Mom pressed her advantage. I want your absolute assurance, Principal, that my son will have no further contact with Brian whatsoever during school hours. He nodded again. We will certainly do our utmost to monitor the situation closely and ensure that those parameters are maintained, he promised, sealing my fate with bureaucratic efficiency. The school's response was swift and thorough, a meticulously orchestrated campaign of isolation. My class schedule was immediately reshuffled, strategically designed to ensure I would no longer cross paths with Brian in any academic setting. My lunch period was abruptly changed, severing another casual connection point. And then came the guidance counseling. A well-meaning, yet utterly patronizing, counselor began pulling me out of class for regular check-ins, sessions where she would inquire, with a forced gentleness, how I was feeling and if I wanted to discuss my recent choices. It felt less like support and more like an interrogation. A subtle attempt to re-educate me on the correct perspective. But here's what they couldn't stop. They couldn't stop the relentless gears of my mind from turning, couldn't halt my meticulous planning, couldn't erase the gnawing, undeniable knowledge that somewhere, perhaps just miles away in this very town, Brian and his father were enduring unimaginable suffering. And why? Because everyone, from my own mother to the school principal, had collectively, comfortably, chosen to embrace a convenient, palatable lie rather than confront the painful, inconvenient truth. Then, one afternoon, an encounter solidified everything I had been fighting for. I saw Brian's dad at the grocery store. He stood in the checkout line, a solitary, gaunt figure, his basket containing only the absolute essentials, a loaf of the cheapest generic bread and a single jar of peanut butter. His once sturdy frame now seemed to swim in his clothes, which hung loose and deflated, a stark testament to significant weight loss. The moment his eyes met mine across the crowded aisle, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, shame, embarrassment. Before he quickly averted his gaze, his shoulders hunching, and he hurried toward the checkout, seeking an immediate escape. Hesitation warred with conviction, but conviction won. Mr. Davidson, I called out, my voice a little louder than intended. He stopped, a statue of weary resignation, but didn't turn to face me. You really shouldn't talk to me, kid, he said, his voice a gravelly whisper, devoid of its former warmth. It'll only make things worse for you. Trust me, I pressed on, my voice firm. I know the truth, Mr. Davidson. Brian showed me everything. At that, his shoulders, already stooped, seemed to sag even further, weighed down by an invisible burden. He finally turned, his face etched with profound weariness, his eyes like raw wounds. The truth, he said, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping him. The truth doesn't matter, kid, when no one, absolutely no one, is willing to listen to it. But I want to help, I insisted, my voice thick with emotion. He finally turned fully, and the sight of him was heartbreaking. His eyes, rimmed raw and red, betrayed an exhaustion that seeped into his very bones, a profound weariness that went beyond simple lack of sleep. You're a good kid, he murmured, his gaze surprisingly gentle despite his pain, a really good kid. But please, for your own sake, stay away from us. It's too dangerous for you to be involved." With those final, heavy words, he climbed into his battered car and, with a tired groan of the engine, slowly drove away, leaving me standing alone in the grocery store parking lot, laden with the heavy burden of a truth no one wanted to hear. In the battered, fading hulk of his car, where the ghost of a predator decal, once vibrant and menacing, now barely clung to life beneath a shoddy, hastily applied layer of cheap, mismatched paint. It was a stark visual metaphor, a once-feared image now blurred into obscurity, much like Brian's father himself, painted over by layers of public scorn and accusation. Later that evening, the air in my room grew thick with an unspoken tension as Mom appeared, her laptop clutched like a weapon. "I want to show you something," she announced, her voice a little too firm, a little too certain. She flipped open the screen, revealing the glowing portal to the parent Facebook group. There, an onslaught of accusations against Brian's dad painted him as a monstrous figure. Saw him looking near the playground. One post screamed, punctuated by angry emojis. He followed my daughter in the store. Another falsely claimed, igniting a fresh wave of outrage in the comments. The most chilling question echoed repeatedly. Why isn't he in jail yet? My stomach twisted into knots. "These are lies," I retorted, my voice trembling with indignation. "He's just existing, and they're twisting his every mundane action into something criminal." But her response was chillingly dismissive. 300 parents can't all be wrong, she stated, her jaw set with an unshakable conviction. With a definitive click, she closed the laptop, cutting off the digital deluge of hatred. "I'm trying to protect you," she insisted, her gaze piercing. "This man is manipulating you through his son, twisting your perceptions." The irony was suffocating. "No, you're the one being manipulated," I shot back, the words burning on my tongue, manipulated by gossip and fear. "And I've had enough." Mom slowly rose, her posture rigid, radiating an unnerving resolve. "I've made appointments with a therapist," she declared, the words dropping like stones. "Someone who specializes in children who've been influenced by dangerous individuals." My blood ran cold, a glacial current seizing my veins. Did she truly believe that? "You think I'm brainwashed?" I whispered, the accusation sharp. "I think you're confused," she calmly countered, "and I'm going to fix this." And then, she was gone, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence, consumed by a volcanic surge of unadulterated rage. They were constructing invisible walls around me, brick by brick, intent on forcing me to abandon Brian and his dad. But walls, physical or metaphorical, had never, ever stopped me before. Much later, under the cloak of night, a hushed murmur drifted up from downstairs. Mom was on the phone, her voice an unsettling blend of concern and calculated strategy. "Yes, I'm very concerned," I heard her say, the words carefully chosen. "He's obsessed with proving their innocence, you know? Taking pictures of supposed evidence. I truly think they've really gotten into his head." Her tone, so measured and deliberate, sent a shiver down my spine. I understood then. She wasn't just worried. She was meticulously constructing her own narrative, painting me as emotionally unstable, a child led astray. Obsessed, manipulated, the very same insidious words, the identical chilling playbook that Catherine, Brian's accuser, had so effectively deployed against his dad. Lying in the dark, I gazed up at my ceiling, a canvas for my churning thoughts. Was it truly that simple? Everyone believed Catherine's embellished tale not because it was true, but because it was simply easier than the arduous, uncomfortable task of questioning it. A mother's theatrical tears in a courtroom, after all, held a raw, primal power, far more compelling and persuasive than a father's quiet, dignified denials. And once a narrative, however false, had been woven into the fabric of public opinion, changing it meant unraveling a complex tapestry of shared belief, forcing everyone to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had been wrong. Worse still, it meant admitting they had actively contributed to the systematic destruction of an innocent family's life. Who, I wondered, truly wanted to shoulder that burden of guilt? Yet, despite the formidable opposition, a quiet, resolute strength bloomed within me. I had time, a precious, dwindling resource, but enough. I had an unshakable determination, a steel-cold resolve that would not bend or break. And most importantly, I possessed the immutable, unassailable truth. They could confiscate my phone, effectively severing my digital lifeline. They could impose draconian restrictions on my computer access, shutting down my avenues of research. They could even physically separate me from Brian at school, attempting to break our bond. They could whisper insidious rumors about me in hushed tones, ostracize me from my peers, and yes, even force me into therapeutic sessions designed to fix my perceived delusion. But what they couldn't do, what no amount of coercion or manipulation could ever achieve, was change the bedrock of what I knew deep in my soul. Brian's dad was innocent, a victim of circumstance and malicious fabrication. And Brian, my friend, was suffering, his young life crumbling under the weight of injustice. Somehow, against all odds, I was going to unearth the proof and lay it bare for everyone to see, a beacon cutting through the fog of lies. Even if it meant enduring the painful ignominy of becoming a pariah myself, cast out by my community. Even if it meant clashing head-on with my own mother, our wills locked in a bitter struggle. Even if the entire town, a monolithic entity of misguided judgment, turned its back on me. For I had come to understand a profound, often cruel, truth. Sometimes, the unflinching pursuit of justice, the unwavering championship of what is right, is worth becoming the villain in everyone else's carefully constructed, comforting story. The next morning, a nascent, daring plan began to crystallize in my mind, an audacious blueprint for rebellion. I knew, with a certainty that thrilled and terrified me, that it was inherently risky, perhaps even profoundly stupid, and would undoubtedly plunge me into a deeper quagmire of trouble. But Brian's last desperate note had ignited a fire under me, a stark deadline. They had only 2 weeks before the cold, unforgiving reality of eviction claimed them. 2 weeks of fleeting vendetta turned the tide, to meticulously peel back the layers of Catherine's insidious lies, to rescue my friend's family from the precipice of ruin. I dressed for school with a practice tease, masking the storm brewing within. I even managed a convincing, affectionate kiss goodbye to Mom, pretending that the world was perfectly normal, that no internal battle lines had been drawn. My mind, however, was already a battlefield, meticulously preparing for the clandestine war ahead. They, with their misguided attempts at protection through isolation and veiled threats of therapy, believed they had shattered my spirit. How profoundly wrong they were. They had no comprehension, no inkling whatsoever, of the relentless, unyielding force I could become when fueled by the absolute certainty of my own righteousness. The therapy appointment loomed, an unavoidable hurdle scheduled for Thursday. That left me with a mere 3 days, 3 precious, ticking days to execute my audacious scheme. That morning, I moved through the bustling school hallways like a phantom, my notebook bulging with handwritten notes and fragmented clues, tacked securely beneath my shirt. A secret weapon concealed. Every muscle in my body felt primed, hyper-aware, knowing that Mrs. Natterson's daughter, a self-appointed sentinel of school morality, would be meticulously cataloging my every blink, every shift. During first period, a sudden, urgent need to use the bathroom served as my prearranged diversion. Instead of turning left, I veered right, slipping soundlessly into the sterile quiet of the computer lab. The room was mercifully empty, save for a lone 7th grader hunched over a project, oblivious to my clandestine mission. I gravitated towards a terminal tucked away in the furthest corner, its screen offering a shield of privacy. With practiced efficiency, I logged in using a fake account I painstakingly crafted weeks ago, a digital disguise. The digital world opened before me, and there it was, Catherine's meticulously curated social media profiles. But a scroll through her posts from 3 years prior revealed a shockingly different persona, a stark contrast to the heartbroken, grieving mother everyone now pitied. There were boastful photos taken in dimly lit bars, angry, venomous rants about deadbeat men, and one particularly chilling post that sent a jolt of recognition through me. It read, with an almost predatory glee, "Some people just need to learn their lesson the hard way." I always get what I want in the end. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of screenshots, capturing every damning detail. I swiftly emailed the trove of evidence to a newly created, secure account, securing my precious finds just moments before the shrill, jarring sound of the bell ripped through the quiet. As I hurried back to class, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Brian's usual spot, typically brimming with his nervous energy, was conspicuously empty. His desk, a silent sentinel, sat vacant, a glaring void that amplified my growing anxiety. Later, during the cacophony of lunch, my fingers, almost instinctively, sought out our clandestine meeting place, the worn-out copy of Moby Dick we used as a dead drop. Tucked inside, I found his latest, most devastating note. The scrawled words were a punch to the gut. Dad collapsed yesterday, not eating enough. Hospital won't admit him. No insurance. We're sleeping in the car now. My hands, which had felt so steady just moments before, began to tremble uncontrollably, the paper rustling like autumn leaves in a sudden gust of wind. The sheer, brutal injustice of it all washed over me. They, a family in crisis, were huddled in their car, navigating the harsh realities of homelessness, while Catherine, the architect of their misery, likely luxuriated in the very house Brian's dad had poured his life's earnings into, now enjoying a comfort she hadn't earned. A cold certainty settled in my bones. I had to accelerate my plan. Time was not just ticking, it was screaming. As soon as the final bell shrieked, I executed the next phase of my strategy. Staying for math tutoring, Mom, I announced with a manufactured nonchalance, knowing she'd eventually call the teacher to verify. But that crucial hour of borrowed reprieve was all I needed. I bolted from the school, my legs pumping, covering the 6 blocks to the public library in a breathless, desperate sprint. The library's anonymity was a godsend. Its public computers offered unrestricted access, no student logins required, no digital breadcrumbs leading back to me. I plunged back into my research, tracing digital footprints, piecing together fragments of information. Approximately 20 minutes into my intense session, a ripple of unease spread through the quiet space. Catherine walked in. The woman who glided through the rows of books bore absolutely no resemblance to the tear-stained, seemingly broken figure captured in the courtroom photos. Dressed in effortlessly chic designer clothes, her perfectly manicured nails glinting under the fluorescent lights, she exuded an almost predatory confidence in every purposeful stride. She made a beeline for the fiction section, and I instinctively ducked, shrinking behind the protective barrier of my monitor, my breath catching in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo, as I watched her through the gaps in the screen. She browsed with an air of casual entitlement, but her eyes occasionally flickered around the room, a subtle, disquieting surveillance. Was this a mere coincidence, an innocuous stop at the library? Or had some unseen informant, a spy in the shadows, tipped her off about my repeated visits? She eventually departed after a tense 10 minutes, but an icy tendril of dread coiled in my gut. I couldn't shake the unsettling conviction that her eyes, in one of those fleeting glances, had indeed met mine. Gathering my sparse belongings, I hastily packed up and chose a different route home, opting for the winding, less exposed paths through the park, hoping to vanish into the twilight. As I approached my house, a wave of crushing inevitability washed over me. Mom was waiting on the porch, a silent, formidable silhouette against the setting sun, her arms crossed, her expression stern. Math tutoring ended an hour ago, she stated, her voice devoid of warmth, a sharp blade cutting through the evening air. I walked with some friends, I mumbled, a feeble, transparent lie. She didn't dignify it with a response. Instead, she slowly raised her phone, the screen illuminating my own face a candid, damning photo of me hunched over a public computer at the library. Mrs. Patterson saw you, she revealed, her eyes, usually soft, now hard as flint. She's very concerned you're still investigating that family, caught red-handed, the illusion of my carefully constructed anonymity shattered. I remained utterly silent, offering no defense as she silently ushered me into the house. Her unwavering gaze communicated a clear message. The impending therapy appointment, meant to cure my defiance, couldn't arrive soon enough for her. Later that night, the normally quiet hum of our house was punctuated by the low, insistent rumble of an argument drifting up from downstairs. Dad had returned early from his business trip, and Mom, predictably, was already briefing him, her voice a rapid-fire torrent of accusations. He's obsessed, Tom, she exclaimed, her voice laced with exasperation, taking pictures of documents, researching the mother, defending them constantly. There was a pause. A moment of almost unbearable quiet before Dad's calm, measured voice cut through the tension. Maybe we should hear him out, he suggested, his tone surprisingly open, thoughtful. What if there's more to the story than we know? Mom's voice immediately ratcheted up, a crescendo of disbelief and anger. Not you, too, she shrieked, the words sharp with betrayal. That man is dangerous. The whole community knows it. Dad, however, remained remarkably unruffled, his reasoning a cool counterpoint to her emotional fervor. The whole community has been wrong before, he calmly retorted, a simple truth that hung in the air like a challenge. Their argument continued, a seesaw battle between emotion and logic. But for me, huddled in my room, a fragile, brilliant spark of hope ignited. Dad had always been the more rational one, less susceptible to the seductive whispers of gossip, less swayed by the prevailing currents of fear. If anyone could be reasoned with, truly convinced by the stark evidence, it was him. Perhaps, just perhaps, I could break through to him the next morning. As the morning light tentatively crept into the classroom, casting long, early shadows, I couldn't help but notice, with a familiar pang of unease, that Brian's seat, just 2 rows ahead of me, remained conspicuously empty. It was his 3rd consecutive day missing from school, a silent, unsettling void that seemed to grow larger with each passing hour. Later, while navigating the bustling hallways, snippets of hushed conversation from the teacher's lounge drifted my way, confirming my worst fears. He's been absent for 3 days straight now. I heard Mrs. Davies murmur, her voice tinged with a blend of concern and what sounded suspiciously like quiet judgment. Another voice, sharper, belonging to Mr. Henderson, quickly interjected, probably too mortified, wouldn't you say, too embarrassed to show his face after. Well, after what his father did, the unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air, a suffocating cloud of condemnation. A furious heat surged through me, a primal urge to scream, to shout at them that they had it all twisted, that their entire premise was utterly, tragically backwards. But I bit my tongue, clamping my lips shut with a fierce resolve. Let them misinterpret my silence as defeat. Let them believe I had simply given up. They would soon discover the profound error of their assumptions. During the designated library period, amidst the hushed rustle of turning pages and the faint scent of old paper, I instinctively reached for the well-worn book Brian and I shared for notes. My fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper tucked deep within its pages. Pulling it out, I immediately recognized that the angular, unfamiliar script wasn't Brian's. The message was stark, chillingly direct. Stop digging, or your friend pays the price. Kay, a cold wave washed over me. Kay Catherine. She knew. She knew I was relentlessly investigating her, piecing together the fragmented truth. My hands began to tremble almost imperceptibly as I carefully, almost reverently, pocketed the ominous note. This was no longer just about parental drama or the fleeting whispers of school gossip. It was escalating into something far more sinister, far more dangerous. After the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, I managed to persuade Dad to take a detour. Please, Dad, I pleaded, my voice laced with an urgency I couldn't quite mask. Just drive me past Brian's old apartment. I just need to see. When we arrived, the parking lot, usually bustling, was desolate. Brian's family car, a distinctive older model, was nowhere to be found. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. We patiently checked 3 other nearby parking lots, each search yielding nothing but a deeper sense of dread, before I finally spotted it. Tucked away behind a sprawling grocery store, almost deliberately hidden, was their car. Peering through the gloom of the tinted windows, my heart lurched. Brian's dad was slumped in the driver's seat, a figure of profound exhaustion, and Brian himself was curled up in the back, a small, vulnerable huddle. Dad, please, I begged, my voice cracking with emotion. Just look at them. Really look. Does that honestly look like a dangerous man to you? Does that look like someone who deserves to be judged so harshly? Dad stared, his gaze fixed on the desolate scene before us, for a long, heavy moment. The silence in the car was thick, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken thoughts, he said, "Get back in the car." But instead of heading straight home, he quietly, almost deliberately, pulled into the grocery store's bustling parking lot. He emerged a few minutes later, carrying two bulging bags of groceries and the enticing aroma of a hot rotisserie chicken. "Stay here," he instructed me, his voice softer now. I watched as he approached their car, a silhouette against the harsh fluorescent lights of the store. He knocked gently on the window, a sound barely audible from my vantage point. Brian's dad jerked awake, a flicker of raw fear flashing across his face, a deeply ingrained reflex. But Dad simply held up the bags, a silent offering. They talked for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, Brian's dad shaking his head repeatedly, his gestures conveying a stubborn refusal. Finally, Dad gently placed the groceries on their car's hood and walked back. He wouldn't take them at first, Dad explained as we drove away, the scent of the chicken still lingering in the air. Said he didn't want charity, said he could manage. I told him, it wasn't charity, Dad, it was just one father helping another. What's wrong with that? That night, the familiar murmur of Dad and Mom's voices drifted from their bedroom, another argument simmering beneath the surface of their usual quiet. But this time, I heard Dad's voice rise, infused with a newfound questioning, a hint of genuine doubt. "What if we're wrong, Janet?" he asked, his words clear through the thin wall. "What if, in our haste to believe the worst, we're actually destroying an innocent family?" The question hung in the air, a poignant challenge to their previously unwavering certainty. Thursday arrived with an unwelcome swiftness, the therapist's office, Dr. Reeves' domain was cloyingly sweet with the scent of vanilla candles, and every inch of wall space was adorned with saccharine inspirational posters, their cheerful slogans feeling deeply ironic given my current state of mind. Dr. Reeves herself looked precisely as I had imagined, intelligent wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, a perpetually sympathetic smile playing on her lips, and a pristine notebook poised, pen ready to capture every word. "Your mother tells me you've been quite spirited," she began, her voice a soothing balm, defending a classmate whose father, she says, has a rather concerning history. I chose my words with meticulous care, each syllable weighed for its potential impact. "I've seen evidence," I stated, looking her directly in the eye, "that the story everyone in the community believes might not be the full truth. In fact, it might be fundamentally wrong." She nodded gently, her sympathetic smile unwavering. "Sometimes," she said, her tone almost paternal, "when we care deeply about someone, we naturally want to believe the best about them, don't we? It's a very human impulse." She paused, letting the thought settle. "But sometimes," she added, her gaze softening, "that very impulse can blind us to important red flags, to clear signs of trouble." I didn't back down. "What if," I countered, leaning forward slightly, "the red flags are actually pointing at the wrong person? What if we're all looking in the wrong direction entirely?" For the next hour, we circled each other like weary sparring partners. She would delicately suggest that I might be naive, perhaps even manipulated by clever half-truths. I would calmly, steadfastly counter her suggestions with the cold, hard weight of facts I had uncovered. She would speak of the importance of trusting community judgment, of respecting established narratives. And I, just as stubbornly, would point out, with historical examples and logical arguments, that communities have been catastrophically wrong before, often with devastating consequences for the innocent. By the end of our session, her sympathetic smile had tightened noticeably, replaced by an expression of subtle, yet undeniable, frustration. "I'd like to see you weekly," she told Mom, her voice still professional, but with an underlying firmness. "He's showing signs of oppositional defiance. Great. Just what I needed." Now, in addition to being a deluded meddler, I had a clinical label to contend with. Friday morning, amidst the usual chaos of the school cafeteria, I finally found Brian. The sight of him struck me with a fresh wave of concern. He looked absolutely terrible. His clothes appeared unwashed and rumpled. His eyes were hollow, sunken pools of exhaustion, and his hands trembled slightly as he clutched a crumpled paper bag. "You okay?" I whispered, my voice barely audible above the lunch chatter as I discreetly passed by his table. He shook his head minutely, a gesture so small it was almost imperceptible. "She called Dad yesterday," he managed to whisper back, his voice hoarse. "Said she dropped the restraining order if we came back home." A wave of indignant fury washed over me. "And Dad said," I prompted. "He said no," Brian replied, his gaze dropping to his lap. "She got really angry, furious. What did she do?" I pressed, my heart pounding. He shook his head again. "Nothing yet. That's what scares me the most." The waiting. During lunch, feigning an urgent need to print homework assignments, I seized the opportunity to use a teacher's computer while she was at a faculty meeting. Instead of printing, I stealthily logged into the secure email account where I had been meticulously saving all my accumulated evidence. There, amidst the usual school notifications, was a new message. No sender name, just a chilling, anonymous subject line. "You were warned." Attached was a photo of grainy, unsettling image of me, taken from behind, sitting at the library computer, Catherine. She had been there that day. She had been watching me, a predatory shadow lurking in the periphery. Just then, my old burner phone, hidden deep within my locker, buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Mom had confiscated my primary phone weeks ago, convinced I was using it for inappropriate research. The message on the old phone was chillingly direct. Your friend looks tired. Sleeping in cars is so dangerous. Anything could happen. My hands, once again, trembled. I immediately took a screenshot of the undeniable threat and meticulously added it to my ever-growing evidence file. Catherine was growing bolder, her threats escalating, her surveillance becoming unnervingly pervasive. That very afternoon, a summons arrived, pulling me from my history class. Principal Morrison's office. As I stepped inside, the atmosphere was palpably tense. Mom was already there, her face a mask of tight-lipped disapproval, flanked by Mrs. Patterson, a notoriously zealous parent volunteer, and to other equally stern-faced parent representatives from the community. We're concerned about your behavior, Principal Morrison began, his voice formal, his gaze unwavering. Multiple parents have reported seeing you researching private information about a family in our community. Information that is, frankly, none of your business. I straightened my shoulders, trying to project an air of calm I didn't entirely feel. I'm trying to help them, I stated simply, my voice clear and unwavering. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. By spreading lies, you mean, she interjected, her tone laced with venom. That poor woman has suffered enough without you dragging her name through the mud with your baseless accusations. A frustrated sigh escaped me. Have any of you, I asked, sweeping my gaze across the assembled adults, actually bothered to look at the evidence, to really consider what's happening? Or are you just believing what you want to believe, what's easiest to accept? Mom's face flushed a deep crimson, a clear sign of her barely contained anger. Apologize now, she demanded, her voice sharp with indignation. For what? I challenged, refusing to back down. For asking questions. The meeting, predictably, devolved rapidly from there. They spoke in stern, unyielding tones about potential suspension, about limiting my computer access at school, about the necessity of increasing my therapy sessions to twice weekly, a litany of punishments and interventions. I sat in stoic silence, letting their angry words wash over me, letting them plan my supposed punishment, all while knowing that Brian and his dad were likely still sleeping in their car. There lives a precarious balance on the edge of homelessness. That night, the hushed murmur of Mom's voice on the phone drifted into my room. I crept closer, pressing my ear against the door. I'm so sorry for what my son has been doing, I heard her say, her voice thick with apology. Yes, we're handling it, absolutely. No, he won't bother you anymore. Of course, if there's anything else. She was apologizing. To Catherine, to the abuser. She was promising to silence me, to squash my efforts to uncover the truth. A raw scream built in my chest, desperate to be released, but I choked it back down, letting it fester into a knot of cold fury. Saturday morning, Dad took me for a haircut, the mundane routine a stark contrast to the churning turmoil in my mind. On the way, he spoke quietly, his voice thoughtful. I drove by that grocery store again last night, he admitted, almost to himself. They're still there. They have nowhere else to go. After a moment of heavy silence, he continued, your mother means well, son. She's trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I asked, a bitter edge to my voice. From helping innocent people. From doing what's right. Dad was quiet for a long, contemplative moment, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes serious. Show me your evidence, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Really, the word was barely a whisper. I'm willing to look, he clarified, but if I'm not convinced, if it doesn't hold up, you drop this, you stop, deal. I agreed immediately, a wave of desperate hope surging through me, a deal, a chance. That night, while Mom was at her book club, blissfully unaware, I meticulously laid out everything for Dad. The blurred, hastily taken photos Brian had shared of the bruises, the damning court documents detailing Catherine's previous legal entanglements, her disturbingly aggressive social media posts targeting others, her documented history of filing restraining orders, the chilling anonymous threats that had landed in my inbox and on my old phone. Dad studied each piece carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. With each new page, with each new piece of evidence, his expression grew visibly more troubled, more concerned. This is substantial, he finally conceded, his voice low, almost a murmur of surprise. So, you believe me? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. I believe there's more to this story than we've been told, he replied, rubbing his face wearily, much more, but your mother will never accept this, neither will the community. They've invested so much. They put too much stock in their own version of events, so we simply had to let them face the consequences. I quickly added, shaking my head, I didn't actually say that. Dad, my father's gaze drifted, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He looked grave, the weight of our situation settling heavily on his shoulders. But we absolutely need to approach this with intelligence, with strategy, he finally stated, his voice low. Catherine, with her uncanny intuition, clearly knows you're digging into these veiled threats. The question remains, what exactly can we present to the police? She's meticulously careful, a master manipulator. There's nothing overtly or directly threatening enough in her communications for law enforcement to genuinely act upon, nothing that screams immediate danger or tangible evidence of malice. Just as the silence stretched thin with our unspoken anxieties, Dad's phone chimed, a sudden interruption. It was Mom, calling to say her book club was wrapping up earlier than expected. A fleeting moment of normalcy shattering against the hard reality we faced. With practiced, hurried movements, he quickly helped me stash away the incriminating evidence, the screenshots, the scribbled notes, the digital crumbs Catherine had left before swiftly sweeping them away. "We will find a way, son, I promise you," he whispered, his eyes earnest, yet laced with worrying. "But you must be cautious. Do not, under any circumstances, do anything reckless, anything that plays into her wicked schemes." Sunday stretched out, quiet and unnerving, too quiet. Not a single note from Brian, no more thinly veiled threats from Catherine. This profound, oppressive calm felt less like peace and more like the tense stillness before a violent storm. It gnawed at my nerves, kept me on edge, anticipating the inevitable eruption. And then, with jarring abruptness, Monday morning arrived, everything exploded. The moment I stepped onto school grounds, the scene screamed chaos. Flashing police cruisers dominated the parking lot, their blue and red lights painting the asphalt with an ominous glow. Students were clustered in tight, excited knots, their whispers buzzing like a hive, a palpable tension in the air. I pushed through the murdering crowd, a frantic urgency propelling me forward, until the full, devastating tableau came into focus. Brian's dad, his face ashen, stood with his hands locked behind his back in cold, unforgiving handcuffs. Beside a squad car, Brian himself stood, tears streaming and checked down his face, leaving glistening tracks on his cheeks, his small body trembling. And there she was, Catherine, a stark contrast to their despair. She held a blooded tissue delicately to her nose, her head tilted, talking animatedly, almost performatively, to an officer. "He attacked me," she declared, her voice carrying a faint tremor of distress. I merely wanted to discuss our son, and he just went absolutely crazy. In that instant, a chilling clarity washed over me. I knew, with absolute certainty, precisely what dark game had been played. She had provoked him somehow, masterfully orchestrating a scene, perhaps even inflicting a minor injury upon herself, then immediately dialed the police. It was the classic abuser's playbook, a chillingly effective tactic, bait and provoke a volatile reaction, then seamlessly pivot into the role of the helpless victim. That's not true. I roared, a surge of adrenaline propelling me forward, my voice raw with indignation. "She's lying. She's manipulating you." An officer, a burly figure, stepped in front of me, his hand firmly on my chest. "Stay back, son, but I have evidence," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "She's the abuser here, not him." Over the officer's broad shoulder, Catherine's eyes met mine. A slow, subtle smile played on her lips, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph that sent a shiver down my spine. They led Brian's dad to the police car, the metallic click of the door a dreadful punctuation mark. Brian, in a desperate, futile attempt, tried to follow him, but Catherine's hand shot out, her grip like a vice on his arm. "You're coming home with me, sweetheart," she cooed, her voice sickly sweet. "Where you belong, no?" Brian cried, struggling to pull away from her grasp, his face contorted in fear and defiance. "I won't go with you." Catherine turned to the officers, her composure unwavering. "He's my son," she stated, as if that simple fact settled everything. "I have full custody." He's simply confused, you see, because his father has been filling his head with all sorts of terrible lies, and just like that, they made Brian go with her. I watched, a sickening knot of helplessness twisting in my gut, as she steered him towards her car, her grip terrifyingly tight on his slender arm. He looked back at me, his eyes wide with an unspeakable terror, a silent plea that tore at my very soul. Back home, I poured out the entire, harrowing account to Dad, every detail tumbling out in a rush. He immediately contacted a lawyer friend, his face grim, but the news that trickled back was anything but good. With Catherine's new, damning accusation, Brian's dad would likely be held at least overnight, perhaps even longer. And with the existing, ironclad custody orders, Catherine held every legal right to take Brian, to whisk him away into her clutches. "We absolutely need those threats she sent," Dad emphasized, his voice strained. "They would unequivocally show that she's been meticulously planning this entire manipulative charade." But when I frantically checked my hidden phone, a cold dread washed over me. The messages were gone, vanished without a trace. Somehow, with a chilling display of foresight and digital cunning, she had remotely deleted them, scrubbing the evidence clean. I still had the screenshots, tucked away safely in my email, but a desperate question echoed in my mind. Who would ever truly believe that mere digital images, easily faked, were real? Especially when presented by a child. That night, sleep was an impossible luxury. I lay awake, tossing and turning, my mind consumed by agonizing thoughts of Brian trapped in that house with her. Was she hurting him? Was he truly okay? Or was he enduring unimaginable torment? Tuesday morning, Brian's seat in class remained hauntingly empty. I overheard hushed conversations among the teachers, their voices laced with sympathy. Catherine had called, they whispered, claiming he was utterly traumatized and desperately needed time to readjust to the new, fractured reality. But I knew better. My gut screamed the truth. She wasn't nurturing him. She was holding him prisoner, isolating him. During lunch, an overwhelming sense of urgency spurred me into action. I made my escape, slipping away unnoticed. I knew with painful clarity that I had promised Dad I wouldn't be reckless, that I wouldn't do anything foolish. But the thought of Brian, alone and vulnerable in her grasp, was an unbearable weight. I couldn't leave him there. My legs turned, a desperate rhythm carrying me the 8 blocks to Catherine's house. The curtains were drawn tight, sealing off any view, but the sounds that pierced the silence were horrifying. I could hear shouting, sharp and angry, then a violent crash, followed by Brian's voice, high-pitched and utterly terrified. "Please, Mom, I'm sorry," the words echoed, a desperate plea. Trembling, I pulled out my hidden phone and dialed 911. "I think someone's being harmed at 438 Maple Street," I whispered into the receiver, trying to keep my voice steady. I can hear screaming and things breaking inside. I pressed myself against the rough bark of a towering oak tree, waiting, heart pounding, until the police cruisers arrived. They knocked, and Catherine answered, looking perfectly composed, her face a mask of serene innocence. "Officers, is something quite wrong?" she inquired, her voice sweet and concerned. "We received a call about a disturbance," one officer explained. Catherine chuckled lightly, a dismissive sound. "Oh, that must have been the TV. I was watching an action movie, quite a loud one. My apologies if it was too boisterous. They bought it. They actually bought it, hook, line, and sinker." I wanted to scream, to tear my hair out, to yell that Brian was in there, probably hurt, probably terrified beyond words. But a cold, rational voice in my head reminded me they would just dismiss me, call my parents, and label me an overactive child. After the officers, seemingly satisfied, drove away, Catherine stepped onto her porch. Her eyes, piercing and cold, found mine precisely where I was hidden behind the tree. "I know you're there," she called out, her voice still dripping with an unnervingly sweet venom. "Brian wants to tell you something." Brian then appeared in the doorway, his small figure framed by the menacing shadows of the house. Even from this distance, I could discern the angry red mark blooming on his cheek, a stark testament to the violence inside. "Stop trying to help," he mumbled, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, utterly devoid of emotion. "You're just making everything worse. Just leave us alone." Catherine's hand rested on his shoulder, her fingers subtly squeezing, a silent, chilling assertion of control. It was sickeningly clear. He was reading from a script, her words echoing from his mouth. I ran back to school, my lungs burning, arriving just as the final bell for lunch break rang. My teacher, her expression exasperated, marked me tardy, but I didn't care, not one bit. A fierce, unyielding determination solidified within me. I had to do something real, something decisive. That afternoon, a profound decision crystallized in my mind. If the adults, ensnared by Catherine's cunning and their own preconceived notions, refused to listen to cold, hard evidence, then perhaps, just perhaps, they would listen to Brian himself. To his story, told through my voice. I began recording videos on my hidden phone, meticulously documenting everything. I meticulously detailed the dates, the precise timeline of events, and those critical threats I'd had the foresight to screenshot before Catherine remotely erased them. "My name is narrator's name," I began, my voice trembling slightly but firm with conviction. "And I am about to tell you the absolute truth about Catherine Davidson." I uploaded the video to YouTube that very night, then, with a nervous flutter in my stomach, shared the anonymous link in the parent Facebook group, hoping it would spread like wildfire. Within an hour, the view count climbed to 50, then rapidly surged to 100. And then, with an explosive force, Mom burst into my room, her face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "What in the world have you done?" The video, it turned out, was already a heated topic of discussion within the group. Some parents, blindly loyal to Catherine's carefully constructed image, were quick to label me a liar, a malicious fabricator. But others, thankfully, were beginning to ask the crucial questions. Why would a 12-year-old concoct such an elaborate story? What exactly does he stand to gain from such accusations? "You are grounded indefinitely," Mom declared, her voice sharp and unwavering. "No school, no leaving the house, absolutely nothing until you take that video down. Right now, my jaw dropped. Excuse me." I retorted, my voice rising with indignation. "No. Ground me forever if you want, but that video stays up." "It will not be removed." Dad, alerted by the raised voices, appeared silently in the doorway, his presence a calm anchor amidst the storm. "Janet," he said quietly, addressing Mom, "have you actually watched it?" "I don't need to watch lies about that poor woman," Mom shot back, dismissing his question. "I watched it," Dad repeated, his voice gentle but firm, his eyes holding a new, profound understanding. "And I think, Janet, that we absolutely need to consider the possibility that our son might, in fact, be telling the truth." They argued for what felt like an eternity, a full hour of heated debate. Mom accused Dad of enabling my delusions, of being swayed by a child's imagination. Dad, in turn, systematically pointed out the compelling evidence I had painstakingly presented in the video. Finally, with a dramatic huff, Mom stormed out of the house, declaring she was staying at her sister's until this family came to its senses, leaving a tense, echoing silence in her wake. By Wednesday morning, the video's view count had exploded, soaring to over 2,000. Comments poured in, a torrent of digital opinions. Some people, predictably, called me a brat, a manipulative child seeking attention. But more profoundly, a growing chorus of others began to share their own deeply personal stories of false accusations, of the agonizing struggles male abuse victims face in simply being believed. A powerful validation that echoed across the screen. Then, with a chilling precision that belied her seemingly calm demeanor, Catherine launched her devastating counterattack. A meticulously crafted, highly incriminating video suddenly materialized on the parent-teacher Facebook page. A digital public square where reputations could be built or utterly shattered in an instant. The footage itself was a masterclass in manipulation. One clip, seemingly innocuous, captured grainy security camera views from a local store, artfully edited to show me stalking her at the public library, a place meant for quiet study. Another, even more unsettling, depicted me lurking with sinister intent just outside the perimeter of her family home. Each frame had been meticulously sliced and rearranged, every crucial piece of contextual information surgically removed, transforming my innocent presence into something predatory, depicting me as an obsessed and undeniably dangerous figure. Her accompanying post, laced with a chillingly effective blend of victimhood and outrage, declared, "This disturbed child has been relentlessly harassing my family, terrorizing us with his alarming fixation." She didn't stop there. The narrative quickly escalated, demanding, his father should be thoroughly investigated for actively encouraging and enabling this profoundly disturbing behavior. I live in constant fear for my safety and, more importantly, for the well-being of my innocent sons. How can we protect our children from such predatory obsessions? The response was immediate, visceral, and overwhelmingly hostile. The tide of public opinion, a formidable force when roused, instantly turned against us with a crushing ferocity. A furious chorus of parents, fueled by Catherine's cunningly framed accusations, roared for immediate action. The outrage was palpable. Some voices shrilled for Dad's immediate dismissal from his job, convinced he was a complicit enabler of my supposed stalking. Others, even more extreme, clamored for me to be institutionalized, suggesting I was a danger to society, beyond the reach of normal discipline. The principal, Mr. Morrison, quickly capitulated to the mounting pressure, his voice undoubtedly heavy with regret as he delivered the news to Dad. I was summarily suspended, not for a day or a week, but indefinitely, contingent upon a full psychological evaluation. Suddenly, the previously optional therapy appointments weren't just a suggestion. They became an inescapable, mandatory fixture in my life. Yet, amidst this escalating nightmare, a flicker of hope emerged from the most unexpected corner. A twist in the plot no one could have foreseen. Brian's father's lawyer, a sharp legal mind tirelessly working against overwhelming odds, had somehow stumbled upon my video, the one I'd posted detailing Catherine's manipulative tactics. He wasted no time calling Dad that very afternoon, his voice crackling with a newfound urgency. "Your son's video," he emphasized, "is quite literally the first genuine piece of leverage, the first real help we've encountered in this tangled case. Would he be willing to brave the storm and testify, to share what he's personally witnessed?" Dad, torn between hope and protection, hesitated. He's only 12. A child navigating a bewildering adult world, he explained, and the entire community has already branded him, turned its collective back. Can we ask him to face even more? The lawyer, however, pressed on, his legal acumen cutting through the emotional turmoil. "I understand your concerns, truly. But that video, your son's raw and varnished account, is reaching beyond the confines of your immediate community. It's provoking questions, sparking doubts in minds untouched by the local gossip. And sometimes, Dad," he concluded, his voice firm with conviction, "that's precisely all it takes. One undeniable crack, one tiny fissure in an otherwise impenetrable, carefully constructed narrative. To bring the whole edifice crumbling down, sleep became an elusive dream that night, the darkness filled with a churning cocktail of anxiety and a fragile, desperate hope." Brian remained ensnared in Catherine's manipulative web, his father still unjustly languishing in a jail cell, and now, my own family felt as if it were teetering on the brink of collapse. Fractured and reeling, yet a sliver of defiance persisted. My video, that digital cry for justice, was still out there, stubbornly circulating, silently spreading its truth. Perhaps, just perhaps, it would eventually reach someone, anyone, who possessed the power to intervene and truly help. Then Thursday arrived, heralded not by a grand revelation, but by a quiet, yet utterly seismic breakthrough that emanated from the most unexpected, almost miraculous, source imaginable. A woman named Sarah, a ghost from Catherine's past, dropped a bombshell in the comment section of my video. "Catherine Davidson," she wrote, her words cutting through the noise, "was my roommate in college. Let me tell you, everything this kid is articulating, every disturbing detail, precisely aligns with the insidious patterns I personally witnessed. She once put her ex-boyfriend in the hospital, and with a breathtaking display of manipulation, she managed to convince absolutely everyone that he was the aggressor, the villain in the story. And yes," she added, confirming the chilling reality, "I have photographic evidence. Attached to Sarah's comment were startling images, relics from 2 decades prior, that painted a profoundly different picture of Catherine. There she was, Catherine herself, her knuckles visibly bruised and swollen, a chilling smirk playing on her lips as she callously laughed about teaching him a lesson. Even more damning were snippets of old police reports that Sarah had painstakingly dug up. In those official documents, Catherine was unequivocally listed as the primary aggressor, yet somehow, with her silver tongue and manipulative charm, she had always managed to talk her way out of any lasting charges, a pattern of impunity. Knowing Catherine's penchant for digital erasure, I acted with lightning speed, feverishly screenshotting every single piece of Sarah's corroborating evidence, every image, every word, before Catherine could inevitably swoop in and have it scrubbed from the internet, lost forever. But Sarah, unlike so many others who might have just posted and moved on, was just getting started. Her activism transcended a mere online comment. She launched a relentless campaign of truth-telling. She called the police department holding Brian's father, injecting a desperately needed alternative perspective into their rigid investigation. She alerted local news stations, eager to amplify the whispers of injustice. She called literally anyone who would grant her a moment of their time, a platform for her long-suppressed truth. I stayed silent 20 years ago, she confided to one reporter, her voice brimming with a quiet resolve. And I will carry the weight of that regret no longer. I refuse to make that same catastrophic mistake ever again. By Friday, Catherine's carefully constructed facade of victimhood began to show unmistakable signs of crumbling, revealing significant and alarming cracks in her narrative. The very security footage she had so confidently presented was now under intense scrutiny, dissected by critical eyes. Pertinent, damning questions began to emerge. Why was she covertly filming a child in the first place? And how did she manage to procure surveillance footage from multiple, distinct locations? The insidious implication was clear. Her actions now looked disturbingly less like the fearful reactions of someone being stalked, and chillingly more like the calculated surveillance of a stalker herself. Armed with my compelling video evidence and Sarah's irrefutable eyewitness testimony, Brian's father's lawyer wasted no time immediately petitioning the court for an emergency custody hearing. A judge, acknowledging the gravity of the new evidence, swiftly agreed to review the contentious case on Monday. But Catherine, ever the master manipulator, was far from conceding defeat. She had one more insidious card to play. That very Friday afternoon, in a desperate, vindictive move, she contacted Dad's workplace, spinning a baseless tale that he had explicitly threatened her. Her proof was a recording, a voicemail he had innocently left, but which she had cleverly and maliciously edited, stripping away its original context. To make his simple plea for Brian's return to school sound menacing and coercive, Dad's boss, faced with such a serious, albeit fabricated accusation, had no choice but to call him into an urgent meeting. An investigation was immediately launched, and in the interim, Dad found himself suspended from his job, albeit with pay. A temporary reprieve that did little to ease the heavy burden of the accusation. Later that night, tears blurring my vision, I choked out an apology to him. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Dad. I've ruined everything for our family." But Dad, with an unwavering strength and a firm, resolute voice, looked at me and said, "No, son. You stood up for the truth, for what was right. And that, my boy, is never, ever wrong. Not even when it cost us dearly, yet the cost was undeniable. Mom was still conspicuously absent from our home, having texted Dad to declare she wouldn't return until I got help for my obsession, as she put it. Our family, once a solid unit, was now irrevocably fractured, mirroring the painful disintegration of Brian's own household. Saturday was a blur of nervous energy, my finger constantly refreshing the statistics on my video. The numbers were staggering, climbing rapidly, over 50,000 views now, a testament to its burgeoning reach. News outlets, sensing a compelling, controversial story, were finally picking it up, their headlines hinting at the seismic shift underway. Local boys' viral video sparks fierce debate about believing abuse victims, blared one particularly poignant headline, capturing the essence of the burgeoning conversation. The comment section, as expected, had devolved into an unbridled battlefield, a digital war zone of opinions and accusations. Catherine's staunch loyalists, still clinging to her fabricated narrative, hurled vitriol, branding me a manipulative monster. Yet, for every hateful comment, a growing chorus of courageous individuals emerged, sharing their own deeply personal, heartbreaking stories. Men, long silenced by societal expectations, spoke of being abused and cruelly disbelieved. Children recounted the agony of watching their fathers' lives utterly destroyed by the insidious poison of false accusations. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, but with increasing momentum, the dominant narrative, once so firmly fixed, was visibly shifting, bending under the weight of these collective truths. Then Sarah, our unexpected ally, delivered the final crushing blow. She posted again, but this time, it wasn't just photos or comments, she had video. It was grainy, decades-old camcorder footage from their college days, but the content was utterly devastating. There on screen was a younger Catherine, her voice clear despite the technological imperfections, brazenly admitting her calculated deception regarding her ex-boyfriend. He was going to leave me, she confessed with chilling nonchalance, so I made absolutely sure nobody, not a single soul, would believe him when he tried to tell his side of the story. This wasn't just evidence. This was the undeniable, incontrovertible smoking gun, a confession laid bare. I didn't hesitate for a second. I downloaded that video immediately, backing it up on every device and cloud storage I possessed, knowing with absolute certainty that this was the irrefutable proof everyone desperately needed to finally see the truth. But Catherine, trapped and cornered, wasn't ready to surrender. In one last, chillingly desperate play late Saturday night, she flooded Facebook with a new, agonizing post. Brian, she claimed, had run away. My troubled son, her post tearfully declared, has been so utterly brainwashed by his father's insidious lies that he has fled our home in despair. Please, I beg you, help me find him. The town, already on edge, responded immediately. Police issued an alert, and soon, literally the entire town mobilized, searching frantically for Brian. Catherine played the role of the distraught, desperate mother to perfection, even granting a tearful, heart-wrenching interview to local news, complete with glistening eyes and a quivering voice, painting herself as the ultimate victim once more. But I knew better, with a gut-wrenching certainty that settled deep in my bones. Brian wouldn't run away. He was a creature of habit, and more importantly, he had absolutely nowhere to go, no safe haven to seek refuge. This chilling realization could only mean one thing: Catherine had done something unspeakable. She had hidden him somewhere, secreted him away, precisely to lend a terrifying air of credibility to her latest, most heinous fabrication. I immediately called the police, my voice trembling with urgency as I laid out my theory, my logical deductions. But they dismissed me, casually, almost disdainfully. The boy who made the video, they stated with a frustratingly dismissive tone, is not considered a credible source in this ongoing situation. The systemic bias, the lingering doubt cast by Catherine's initial narrative, was still incredibly potent. So, with every other avenue closed, and Brian's safety hanging precariously in the balance, I did the only thing I could possibly think of, the most immediate and far-reaching action available to me. I grabbed my phone, took a deep breath, and went live on social media. Staring directly into my phone camera, my voice ringing with an urgent, desperate clarity, I declared Brian Davidson did not run away. His mother, Catherine, is actively hiding him somewhere. She has a documented history of this manipulative behavior. Sarah's irrefutable evidence from her past proves it. Brian is in grave danger right now. Please, I implore anyone watching, someone out there, help us find him. The live video, raw and unfiltered, detonated across social media, spreading with an unprecedented velocity. Far faster than anything I had ever posted. People weren't just sharing Brian's photo anymore. They were sharing it, crucially, without Catherine's manipulative narrative. Instead, they accompanied it with stark, powerful warnings. This boy may be held against his will by his mother. His safety is paramount, and just like that, the floodgates of information opened. Tips, specific and actionable, began pouring in. One person reported seeing Catherine's distinctive car parked suspiciously at a desolate, abandoned property on the outskirts of town. Another, even more critically, reported hearing strange, muffled noises emanating from a storage unit she had recently rented, a chilling detail that resonated with my fears. The police, now faced with an undeniable tsunami of public pressure and credible leads, had no choice but to investigate these new avenues. What they discovered sent a collective shiver down everyone's spine. Brian, terrified and alone, was found locked inside Catherine's rented storage unit, huddled with nothing but a sleeping bag and a few bottles of water, a prisoner in his own mother's desperate scheme. The cruelty of her manipulation was breathtaking. She had, Brian later recounted, instilled terror in him by threatening that if he dared to leave, she would immediately call his father. Exploiting his loyalty and fear, the shocking news broke Sunday morning, spreading like wildfire. Catherine was immediately arrested, her reign of psychological terror brought to an abrupt end. Brian was safe, finally free, albeit deeply traumatized by the ordeal, but mercifully, physically unharmed. Footage of police officers leading Catherine away in handcuffs, her face contorted in a furious mask as she shrieked wildly about conspiracy and unjust persecution, became an instant viral sensation, broadcast everywhere, a public spectacle of her downfall. But the true, profound vindication, the undeniable proof of Brian's suffering and his father's innocence, arrived when authorities, now scrutinizing the case with fresh, unbiased eyes, revisited Brian's medical records. The pattern, once obscured by Catherine's lies, was now terrifyingly clear and unmistakable, a history of injuries entirely consistent with sustained abuse. Every single one dating back to before his parents separated, and critically, all occurring during the period when he lived primarily, almost exclusively, with Catherine. The systemic injustice was finally shattered. Brian's dad, his innocence unequivocally proven, was released immediately, stepping out of jail into the embrace of a truth that had taken far too long to surface, but had finally, powerfully, prevailed. The charges were unequivocally dropped, a legal declaration that felt like a colossal weight finally lifting, not just from Brian's dad but from all of us. Then, as if to underscore this monumental shift, the reunion video, a raw, unscripted moment of Brian hurtling into his father's outstretched arms. Tears streaming down both their faces exploded across the internet. It wasn't just popular, it went viral, an unstoppable cascade of authentic emotion that offered a stark, undeniable counter-narrative to the one that had so cruelly dominated. The very community that had, with such fervent conviction, condemned them both, found itself unceremoniously shoved to the edge of an abyss, forced to stare directly into an uncomfortable truth. They had been unequivocally, disastrously wrong. They had, with a collective sigh of relief, chosen the soft embrace of comfortable lies, the familiar narrative spun by Catherine over the jarring, sharp edges of uncomfortable evidence that defied easy explanation. In their haste to judge, their rush to believe a mother's seemingly genuine tears, they had nearly destroyed an innocent family, coming perilously close to dismantling lives because it was simply easier to accept a prepackaged story than to endure the arduous, complex process of questioning and investigation. In the aftermath, a strange, hesitant tide began to turn. Some, humbled by the irrefutable evidence, offered their apologies, varying in sincerity and scope. Principal Morrison, perhaps feeling the weight of the school's misguided actions, personally called, his voice imbued with a newfound gravity, to lift my suspension and the equally unjust school ban on Brian's dad, and in a truly unexpected twist, Mrs. Patterson, the same woman who had been so vocal in her condemnation, actually showed up at our door. She stood there, a casserole dish clutched in her hands, her eyes red-rimmed with what seemed like genuine, tearful regret, a silent testament to the impact of the truth. But, as is often the case when entrenched beliefs are challenged, others doubled down. They clung to their convictions with a fierce, almost desperate tenacity, insisting that Catherine remained the real victim, a paragon of motherhood and justly maligned, and that we had all been cunningly fooled. The once united parent Facebook group, a digital echo chamber of collective outrage, fractured irrevocably into warring factions. Friendships, once thought solid, crumbled under the strain of differing realities. The community that had been so powerfully united in its hatred was now, ironically, divided by the very truth it had once so vehemently rejected. Sunday night brought another poignant shift. Mom came home, and the air in our house, thick with unspoken words, seemed to hold its breath. She paused in the doorway of my room, a long, reflective moment stretching between us before she finally spoke. I was wrong, she stated, her voice bare and unadorned, the simplicity of the admission hitting harder than any elaborate apology. I was so completely focused on protecting you, my child, that I refused to see what was right there, glaringly obvious, in front of me. I, in an attempt to offer some solace, murmured, "You were doing what you thought was right." But she shook her head slowly, a profound weariness etched onto her features. "No," she corrected me, her gaze distant. "I was doing what was easy. I was believing what everyone else believed, swept along by the current, because questioning it, truly examining it, was just too hard." Our family's healing began not with a sudden flourish, but slowly, painstakingly, like mending a shattered vase piece by fragile piece, the individual therapy sessions, Dr. Reeves had initially insisted upon seamlessly transitioned into family sessions, a crucial space where we could finally, collectively, work through what had happened, unearthing buried emotions and rebuilding trust brick by brick. Meanwhile, Brian and his dad, now free from the suffocating cloud of false accusations, found a new apartment, the keys to a fresh start, thanks to the overwhelming generosity of a GoFund campaign that Sarah had bravely initiated. It was an astonishing turn. The very same community that had once shunned them, turning its back in collective scorn, now donated thousands, a tangible outpouring of support to help them start over. At school, the atmosphere was, predictably, different. The polarized reactions mirrored the wider community. Some kids, perhaps captivated by the dramatic unfolding of events, treated me with a new respect, almost like a hero who had championed justice. Others, however, whispered furtively, their voices laced with suspicion, branding me a troublemaker who had destroyed a family, unable or unwilling to accept Catherine's culpability. Brian and I, having traversed such a tumultuous journey together, now simply ate lunch side by side, a silent pact of understanding between us, no longer caring what anyone thought. One day, amidst the mundane clatter of cafeteria trays, Brian turned to me, his gaze earnest. "Thank you," he said, the words quiet but weighty, "for not giving up, for not letting me be forgotten, even when it cost you everything you held dear." My reply was immediate, instinctual. "You would have done the same for me." He shook his head, a faint, reflective smile playing on his lips. "I don't know if I would have been brave enough," he admitted, his eyes distant as he replayed the arduous journey in his mind. "To stand alone against everyone, to keep fighting when your own family, your own mother, turned against you? That, my friend, took real courage." Catherine's actual trial was still months away, a distant legal battle on the horizon, but her reputation was already unequivocally destroyed. The relentless, unyielding tide of truth had finally caught up with her carefully constructed lies, washing away the intricate facade she had so painstakingly built over years. She had lost her son, certainly, but also her freedom, her credibility, and perhaps most significantly, the sympathy she had so cunningly weaponized for so long, turning public sentiment into a potent weapon against others. Yet, for me, the real victory wasn't found in her downfall, her public shaming. It was in the simple, radiant sight of Brian's smile returning, a genuine, unburdened joy that had been absent for far too long. It was in his dad, now able to secure a new job without the insidious whispers and judgmental glances following him like a shadow. It was in the slow, often grudging, process of a community learning that sometimes the truth is far more complex, more nuanced, more difficult to digest than the comfortable, simplistic story they want to believe. I, too, had learned something profound and indelible through this crucible. Standing up for truth isn't easy. It comes with a steep price, costing you friends who can't handle the discomfort, dividing families along fault lines of belief, and forcing you to question everything you thought you knew about justice and human nature. But when you possess an unwavering certainty in your conviction, when you know, deep in your core, that you are right, and especially when someone's very life, their dignity, their future, hangs precariously in the balance, you keep going. You push forward, even if it means becoming the villain in everyone else's convenient narrative, a pariah in their story. Because sometimes, just sometimes, that's precisely what heroes have to do, step into the shadow to bring light to others. Monday morning, however, shattered any illusions of a peaceful aftermath. It brought with it a sudden, jarring chaos. The emergency custody hearing was aggressively scheduled for 2 p.m., a legal skirmish that promised to be anything but civil. Catherine, true to her manipulative nature, wasn't going to simply fade away. She wasn't going down without a fight. She had, with astonishing speed, hired 3 formidable lawyers and, even more dramatically, launched an aggressive media blitz overnight. She appeared on morning shows, her voice dripping with manufactured pathos, claiming she was being persecuted by an online mob, an innocent victim of digital vigilantism. I watched, a knot forming in my stomach, from the quiet sanctuary of my bedroom as she cried on TV, her performance impeccable, weaving a tearful tale of how her disturbed ex-husband had cunningly turned their son against her. She even held up printed screenshots of my video, branding it as nothing more than harassment, a malicious act. The host, a picture of empathetic concern, nodded sympathetically, completely taken in as Catherine meticulously painted herself as a victim of cyberbullying. A sharp knock on my door jolted me from the grim spectacle. It was Dad. The lawyer wants to prep you for testimony, he said, his voice laced with an urgent seriousness. Are you ready for this? I nodded, trying to project an outward calm, but my hands were visibly shaking, a betrayal of my inner turmoil. It was one thing, I realized, to post videos online, to hide behind a screen and a cause. It was an entirely different, terrifying prospect to face Catherine herself in the unforgiving arena of a courtroom. We met Brian's dad's lawyer, Mr. Chen, at his bustling office. He looked utterly exhausted, the strain of the relentless legal battle etched onto his face, yet his eyes held a steely, unwavering determination. Your video, he told me, his voice firm, changed everything. He cracked open the entire case, but then his expression grew more cautious. However, Catherine's team will undoubtedly try to discredit you. They'll paint you as nothing more than a susceptible kid who got manipulated, easily swayed. A surge of panic tightened my chest. What should I say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His advice was clear, concise, and utterly vital, the truth. Stick rigidly to facts, not opinions or interpretations. And whatever you do, don't let them rattle you. Brian was there too. A small, vulnerable figure sitting silently between his dad and a prim social worker. He looked better, certainly, than when I had last seen him trapped in Catherine's house. But there were still faint, telling shadows under his eyes, lingering testament to the trauma he had endured. The social worker, clipboard in hand, kept writing notes with an unsettling diligence every time Brian so much as shifted in his seat. They're evaluating me, Brian whispered to me when she stepped out briefly to see if I'm being coached, if my story is authentic. The courthouse itself was packed to the rafters. The gallery was a sea of familiar faces, parents from school, but they were now starkly divided into clear, opposing camps, a visual representation of the community's splintered loyalties. Mrs. Patterson, incredibly, sat rigidly behind Catherine, a silent show of continued support, while, to my genuine surprise, Mrs. Chen from the library, a quiet, unassuming woman, had chosen to sit on our side, a small but significant gesture of solidarity. Outside, a swarm of local news cameras waited impatiently, their lenses hungry for any dramatic development. Catherine made her entrance with a theatrical flourish, looking perfectly, almost eerily, composed in a conservative suit, a picture of demure suffering. She dabbed delicately at her eyes with a tissue, a practiced gesture, and had even brought props, a carefully curated photo album of happier times with Brian, which she clutched dramatically to her chest, a silent plea for sympathy. The judge, a stern, unyielding woman named Rodriguez, a figure of formidable authority, called the hearing to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. Catherine's lawyers, wasting no time, immediately moved to exclude my testimony, launching a blistering attack. They brazenly labeled me an emotionally disturbed child with an unhealthy obsession. Your Honor, one lawyer declared, his voice dripping with condescension, this boy has stalked my client, posted defamatory videos, and actively encouraged a hateful campaign against a protective, loving mother. Mr. Chen rose to his feet, his demeanor calm but firm. Your Honor, he countered, this boy, through his unwavering courage, uncovered irrefutable evidence of systematic abuse that authorities tragically missed. His testimony is not merely relevant, it is absolutely crucial to exposing the truth. Judge Rodriguez studied me for a long, unsettling moment, her gaze piercing. Weighing my presence in the courtroom, I'll allow it, she finally pronounced, her voice crisp, but I'll be watching for any signs of coaching. Any indication of manipulation will result in immediate dismissal of this testimony. Catherine testified first, and I had to grudgingly admit she was good, really terrifyingly good. She was a master performer, crying precisely at all the right, emotionally manipulative moments. Her voice cracking with perfectly modulated sorrow as she described Brian's dad's alleged violent temper and how she had supposedly lived in a constant state of fear for years. She even produced photos of bruises, conveniently cropped to skillfully hide their true age, implying recent abuse. I only ever wanted to protect my son, she sobbed dramatically, her voice thick with self-pity, but his father, with cruel intent, poisoned him against me. Then came the cross-examination, a shift in the legal battle that sent a jolt through the courtroom. Mr. Chen, stepping forward, pulled up Sarah's video on a laptop, its screen casting a cold, hard light. Miss Davidson, he began, his voice devoid of emotion. Do you recognize your own voice on this recording? Saying. I made sure nobody would believe him when he tried. Catherine's carefully constructed composure shattered instantly. Her face went stark white, a sudden mask of panic. That is that S taken completely out of context. She stammered, her voice now high and thin. I was young. I was being dramatic, Mr. Chen's reply was swift, devastating, and delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Were you being dramatic, Miss Davidson, when you locked your son in a storage unit? I was there, a silent guardian in the bustling courtroom, doing what I believed was right, protecting Brian. Catherine, in her twisted worldview, was attempting to prevent him from seeking solace with his biological father by effectively holding him captive, emotionally and psychologically. Her lawyers, a phalanx of polished suits, erupted with objections, their voices sharp and insistent, but it was futile. The raw, painful truth, piece by agonizing piece, was already eroding her carefully constructed facade. Her mask, that perfect portrayal of a wronged mother, was visibly slipping, revealing glimpses of the malice simmering beneath. Then, the moment arrived for Brian to take the stand. A hush fell over the room, heavy with anticipation. His voice, though quiet and barely above a whisper, resonated with an unyielding steadiness that commanded attention. With a trembling hand, he carefully lifted his sleeve, revealing the stark reality of the burn scars etched onto his arm, undeniable evidence of torment. He didn't just state facts, he painstakingly laid bare the insidious pattern of abuse, describing the cyclical nature of physical harm followed by manipulative emotional reconciliation. All the while, Catherine, seated across the aisle, relentlessly tried to catch his gaze. Her lips, a silent performance of desperation, repeatedly mouthed, "I love you," whenever Judge Rodriguez momentarily averted her eyes, a chilling display of her unwavering psychological game. "She'd hurt us, you know," Brian recounted, his voice thick with a mixture of fear and defiance. Then she'd immediately burst into tears, insisting that we had provoked her, that we had made her do it, and she always threatened, "If you ever tell anyone, they'll take me away from you forever," ensuring our silence through terror. My stomach churned, a knot of pure dread tightening within me, as my turn finally came. My legs, suddenly devoid of strength, felt like trembling jelly as I walked to the witness stand, the short distance feeling like an endless journey. Catherine's eyes, twin pools of pure, unadulterated hatred, bore into me, sending a shiver down my spine. Her lawyer, a predatory shark in tailored wool, immediately launched his assault, his questions designed to undermine my credibility. "Isn't it true," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension, "that you have no other friends in this world except for Brian? Oh, you have friends, I'm sure, but Brian was your first real friend, wasn't he? The kind of friend you do anything to keep." He was painting me as a desperate, easily manipulated child. But I held firm, clinging to Mr. Chen's unwavering advice. "Stick to the facts," I repeated, clearly and simply. "I saw evidence of abuse. I reported it." The lawyer's smirk widened. "You mean you saw exactly what Brian wanted you to see, didn't you? You took photos without permission, didn't you? You stalked my client." He tried to twist my actions, to portray me as an intrusive, obsessive child. "I investigated the truth," I countered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He scoffed. "You're 12 years old. What, pray tell, makes you qualified to investigate anything?" The dismissive tone, the blatant disrespect, ignited a spark within me. I straightened my shoulders, meeting his gaze with unexpected resolve. "Being 12 doesn't make me stupid," I declared, my voice ringing out with a clarity that surprised even myself. "It just means adults think they can lie to me more easily." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, a wave of shock and murmurs. The lawyer's face, a mask of controlled composure moments before, visibly reddened, a dark flush spreading from his collar to his hairline. "Your Honor," he spluttered, struggling to regain his composure. "This child's disrespect is Judge Rodriguez." Her expression unreadable, cut him off with a firm, authoritative voice. "Continue, young man." And I did. I meticulously recounted everything. The precise timeline of events, the undeniable pieces of evidence, the chilling threats Catherine had made. Her lawyers continued to object, their interruptions frequent and increasingly frantic, but I remained calm, unwavering, presenting only the unvarnished facts. When they attempted to discredit me by presenting heavily edited stalking videos of me, I calmly explained the context, the crucial details Catherine had deliberately omitted. She knew I was gathering evidence, I explained to the court, so she decided to gather her own. But she had to edit it, because the raw truth simply didn't support her fabricated story. During a tense recess, as Dad was in the men's room, Catherine seized her chance, cornering me in the deserted hallway. "You little brat," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper, her eyes narrowed slits of pure malice. "You've ruined everything." I instinctively recoiled, taking a step back, but she advanced, pressing closer, a predator stalking its prey. "Brian will never, ever forgive you for this," she snarled, her words dripping with a chilling certainty. "You've utterly destroyed our family." But a new courage had ignited within me, fueled by the day's revelations. "No," I said, my voice rising, intentionally loud enough to carry through the quiet hallway. "You destroyed it. I just showed everyone how." The opportune appearance of a bailiff, his footsteps echoing, caused Catherine to instantly transform, her face contorting back into the familiar, heartbroken mask of the grieving mother. Yet, her performance was too late. Several other parents, lingering nearby, had clearly witnessed the entire, ugly encounter. When court resumed, the impact of that hallway confrontation was undeniable. 3 parents, former members of Catherine's supposedly impenetrable inner circle, bravely stepped forward, asking to testify. They admitted to having gnawing doubts, seeds of suspicion planted by Catherine's increasingly bizarre behavior. One mother, her voice laced with shame, described in vivid detail how Catherine had meticulously coached her on specific, misleading narratives to post in their private Facebook support group. twisting reality for public consumption. Another parent, visibly trembling, revealed that Catherine had explicitly asked her to lie under oath to falsely claim she had seen Brian's father lurking suspiciously near the playground. I truly believed I was helping her, the woman confessed, her voice thick with regret and self-recrimination. She was so incredibly convincing, her stories so heartbreakingly plausible. Catherine's lawyers, their faces a mixture of panic and desperation, scrambled to mitigate the damage, but the floodgates had opened. More devastating cracks began to appear in her crumbling narrative. Hospital records she had submitted, supposedly corroborating Brian's injuries, were meticulously analyzed by an independent medical expert who, with chilling precision, pointed out glaring inconsistencies in dates and diagnoses. The infamous bruise photos, once her most powerful visual evidence, were forensically examined and definitively proven to be years old, predating the custody separation by a significant margin. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Catherine's elaborate, deceitful story had completely, irrevocably unraveled, like a cheaply knit sweater pulled thread by thread. But even then, facing total defeat, she had one last, desperate card to play. "Your Honor," she declared, her voice unnervingly calm as she abruptly stood, completely ignoring the frantic, whispered protests and tugs from her stunned lawyers. "If you give Brian to his father, I will take my own life. I simply cannot live without my son," her voice, now laced with a chilling, manipulative edge, continued. "His blood will be on your hands." "Judge!" The courtroom instantly erupted into a cacophony of gasps, shouts, and murmurs, a wave of shock washing over everyone. Brian, overwhelmed by the sudden, terrifying outburst, began to sob uncontrollably, his small frame shaking. His father instinctively pulled him close, trying to muffle his cries and offer comfort, while Catherine, with a theatrical flair, wailed dramatically. A performance of profound grief designed purely for effect. Judge Rodriguez, her face stern and resolute, brought her gavel down with a resounding, sharp crack that momentarily silenced the chaos. "Missy Davidson," she stated, her voice cutting through the remaining whispers like a blade, "you have just made a direct threat of self-harm in an attempt to manipulate this court. Bailiff, please escort Miss Davidson immediately for a psychiatric evaluation." "No!" Catherine shrieked, her performance dissolving into genuine hysteria. She lunged desperately towards Brian, a wild, uncontrolled movement, but uniformed officers quickly intervened, restraining her with practiced efficiency. "He's my son," she screamed, struggling against their grasp. "You can't take him," as they physically dragged her out of the courtroom, her eyes, filled with blazing fury, locked onto mine. "This is your fault," she shrieked, her voice hoarse with rage. "You did this." The judge, recognizing the need to restore order, immediately called a recess, allowing everyone to process the shocking events and regain their composure. In the hallway, the parents, who had once staunchly supported Catherine, now stood in stunned silence, their faces pale and shell-shocked, their unwavering faith in her shattered. Mrs. Patterson, a woman who had often championed Catherine's cause, approached me tentatively, her steps slow and hesitant. "I owe you a profound apology," she murmured, her voice barely audible, filled with a deep sense of shame. "I was so absolutely sure of her, you know? I mean, she's a mother." I met her gaze, offering a quiet, mature truth. "Mothers can be abusers, too," I said, my voice gentle but firm. She flinched, the words clearly hitting a raw nerve, but then she slowly, painfully nodded, acknowledging the difficult reality. I helped spread those awful lies about Brian's father," she confessed, her eyes downcast. "I honestly don't know how to fix any of this now. My advice, simple yet powerful, resonated with clarity. Start by telling the truth." When court reconvened, an air of solemn finality hung heavy in the room. Judge Rodriguez, her expression grave, delivered her verdict. "Emergency custody is hereby granted to Brian's father, pending a full, comprehensive review. Catherine Davidson will undergo an immediate psychiatric evaluation, and supervised visitation with her son will only be permitted if deemed absolutely safe by mental health professionals." Then, her gaze shifted, settling directly on me, her eyes conveying a depth of gratitude and admiration. "This court also wishes to recognize the extraordinary courage of a young man who stood up for truth, unflinchingly, despite significant personal cost and pressure," she declared, her words echoing through the quiet courtroom. Adults, regrettably, failed Brian Davidson. A 12-year-old, however, did not. Outside the courthouse, a maelstrom of reporters, their cameras flashing like 1,000 tiny lightning strikes, swarmed us, their voices a clamoring chorus of questions. Dad, ever protective, instinctively shielded me with his body. But I couldn't help but overhear their insistent queries. "How does it feel to be hailed as a hero? What compelled you to keep fighting, even when the odds seemed insurmountable?" I wasn't a hero. Not in the traditional sense. I was just a kid, a regular kid who simply couldn't stand by and watch injustice unfold before his very eyes. That night, our phone became a relentless instrument, ringing constantly as news outlets, talk shows, and countless other media organizations clamored for the story. Dad, however, steadfastly turned them all down, his voice firm with paternal love. "You've been through enough," he reiterated gently. Mom, her eyes still red-rimmed but now filled with a quiet pride, sat beside me on the couch. "I'm so incredibly proud of you," she whispered, her arm wrapping around my shoulders. "And I'm so terribly sorry that I didn't listen to you sooner. You were trying to protect me, but I was so fixated on the wrong thing," she admitted, her voice thick with regret. I was so terrified of the monster everyone else described Brian's father that I was utterly blind to the real monster, the one hiding in plain sight, right beside us. Tuesday arrived, signaling my return to school. The familiar hallways felt subtly different, imbued with a new atmosphere. Kids stared, of course, and whispered, but not all of the attention was negative. Some offered respectful nods, a silent acknowledgement of what I had done. Others, however, still viewed me as a disruptive troublemaker, the boy who had irrevocably destroyed a family. Brian was there too, a comforting presence amidst the swirling currents of judgment and curiosity. We found our usual spot at lunch, sitting together, deliberately ignoring the stares. Our shared experience forging an even deeper bond between us. My dad got a job interview Brian shared, his voice filled with a cautious optimism. A company owner saw the news about the trial and said anyone who survived what he did deserves a chance. That's truly wonderful, I thought, a glimmer of hope in the aftermath. It's in another state, Brian added quietly, the joy in his voice tinged with a touch of sadness. Dad thinks we really need a fresh start. Far away from all this, my heart, which had been lifting, now sank like a stone. After everything we'd been through, after all the battles fought and won, I was still losing my best friend. When would he go? I asked, my voice barely audible. If he gets it, next month, maybe? The remainder of that week passed in a surreal haze. Catherine made bail a grim reminder of her temporary freedom, but a court order explicitly barred her from having any contact with Brian or his father. Predictably, she immediately launched onto social media, spinning a new narrative of persecution, portraying herself as an innocent victim. Yet, her support, once a formidable fortress, had utterly evaporated. Even her own lawyers, sensing the irreversible shift in public and judicial opinion, quietly withdrew from the case, leaving her increasingly isolated. Principal Morrison, in an attempt to address the elephant in the room and perhaps offer some solace, held an informal meeting for a select group of students. The school assembly convened not for a typical pep talk, but for a solemn discourse on the perils of rushing to judgment and the paramount importance of verifiable evidence. Though the principal meticulously avoided directly naming Brian's family, every single person in the hushed auditorium understood precisely who he was referring to. A palpable wave of collective acknowledgement rippling through the students and staff. A curious shift in social dynamics followed. Some teachers, who had previously maintained a chilling distance from Brian, now veered dramatically in the opposite direction, their newfound, almost exaggerated kindness making every interaction feel excruciatingly awkward and forced. A thin veneer over their past indifference. A tangible sense of relief washed over our family when Dad's boss personally called him back to work, extending a contrite apology for the premature suspension. We absolutely had to investigate the complaint thoroughly, his boss explained, his tone laced with a hint of sheepishness. But it's unequivocally clear now that this was nothing less than outright harassment. Slowly, tentatively, our family began to rediscover its footing, finding a new, fragile rhythm. Mom and Dad navigated their interactions with a deliberate gentleness, painstakingly rebuilding the trust that the recent ordeal had severely fractured. Even the therapy sessions, initially mandated by Dr. Reeves and viewed with understandable skepticism, transformed into genuinely helpful dialogues once she fully grasped the true, convoluted nature of our situation. You exhibited truly remarkable moral courage, she commended me, her voice filled with admiration. However, it's perfectly natural and absolutely acceptable to feel profound anger about the heavy personal cost this whole ordeal extracted from you. And I was angry, a simmering, righteous anger at the seemingly intelligent adults who had so readily, so thoughtlessly, embraced blatant falsehoods. A searing indignation at the very system itself, which had teetered on the brink of allowing Catherine's insidious schemes to triumph. Most bitterly, I was furious that the act of simply doing what was right, what was fundamentally ethical, had come perilously close to utterly devastating my own family. That Friday afternoon, a call from Sarah punctuated the quiet. Her voice, though strained, held a new resolve. She was flying in specifically for Catherine's impending criminal trial. I simply had to thank you, she confessed, her words tinged with a raw emotion. For 2 decades, I've carried the suffocating burden of guilt, a silent accomplice to injustice. You, unequivocally, gave me an unforeseen chance to finally make things right, to atone for my silence. You helped save Brian, I responded, a quiet acknowledgement of our shared effort. We both played a part. But it was you who initiated it, Sarah. A 12-year-old, it turns out, possessed far more courage than I, at 22, initially did. That same weekend, the parent Facebook group, a once bustling hub of community chatter, spectacularly imploded. A deluge of screenshots, damning evidence of Catherine's private messages meticulously coaching other parents on precisely what defamatory content to post, flooded the internet. The group fractured violently, its members turning on each other with vitriolic accusations and bitter recriminations, each scrambling to assign blame. The digital maelstrom eventually consumed itself, and the group was shut down entirely, a fitting end to its toxic reign. Mrs. Patterson, a beacon of rationality, promptly initiated a new online forum, strictly dedicated to verified information only. She extended an invitation for me to help moderate it, but I politely, yet firmly, declined. My emotional reserves for parent drama were utterly depleted, well dried up by the recent torrent of events. The news, while joyous for Brian, landed with a bittersweet thud. His dad had secured the job, meaning they would be relocating to Oregon in just 3 short weeks. In a desperate, almost frantic effort to condense years of camaraderie into mere days, Brian and I spent every waking moment after school together, clinging to every shared laugh and conversation. "I'll visit, I promise," Brian declared, his voice thick with a forced optimism. "And there's always video chat. It won't be the same," I thought, a pang in my chest. "No," he conceded, his eyes holding a deeper, knowing understanding. "But it's infinitely better than being trapped with her." Catherine's psychiatric evaluation finally rendered official what everyone had already intuitively known, a chilling confirmation of her manipulative nature. The report meticulously detailed a deeply entrenched pattern of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse stretching back decades, a dark thread woven through her adult life. She was subsequently charged with false imprisonment, child abuse, and the egregious filing of false reports, facing a criminal trial that promised to drag on for many arduous months. The Tuesday before Brian's departure, we sought solace in the park where our story had truly begun, the very spot where his dad, what felt like an eternity ago, had heroically shielded me from bullies. "I never properly thanked you, did I?" Brian began, his gaze steady. "For everything. You don't need to thank me," I demurred, feeling a flush of unearned praise. "Yes, I absolutely do," he insisted, a determined sincerity in his voice. He then produced a small, neatly wrapped box. "Dad, and I got you something." Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue, lay a compass suspended from a delicate chain, simple, yet undeniably elegant. "So you'll always know the right direction," Brian explained softly, his eyes twinkling, "even when everyone else around you seems utterly lost." I fastened it around my neck immediately. The cool metal settling against my skin, it felt profoundly right, a tangible anchor. Their moving day arrived with an unwelcome swiftness, far too soon. The entire neighborhood, a silent, curious tableau, watched from their lawns as they meticulously loaded the moving truck. Some, to their credit, possessed the decency to appear visibly ashamed, their gazes downcast. Others merely stared, their expressions unreadable, perhaps silently judging, perhaps simply observing. Brian's dad approached me, extending his hand, his grip firm. "You saved our lives," he stated simply, his voice thick with an unspoken depth of gratitude. "I will never, ever forget that. Take care of him." I managed, my voice a mere whisper, gesturing towards Brian. "Always," he promised, his eyes mirroring my solemnity. Brian enveloped me in a tight, unyielding hug, a desperate embrace. "Best friends forever, forever," I confirmed, the word catching in my throat. I stood rooted to the spot, watching their truck shrink into the distance, eventually disappearing around the corner, the newly acquired compass a heavy, comforting weight against my chest. Mom gently placed her arm around my shoulders, a silent offering of solace. "You truly did a good thing," she murmured, her voice soft. "Even though the pain of it feels so sharp right now." That night, alone in my room, I settled before my computer, the glow of the screen reflecting the quiet intensity in my eyes. I began to type, not another fiery video expose or a scathing article, but a simple, heartfelt post. Sometimes I wrote, my fingers dancing across the keys, "The truth extracts an unimaginable price, costing you everything you hold dear." Sometimes, to truly save the ones you love, you must paradoxically lose your best friend to the cruel hands of distance. Sometimes, being unequivocally right feels infinitely worse, more agonizing, than the blissful ignorance of being wrong. Yet, despite the pain, truth matters, justice matters. And sometimes, perhaps most humbling of all, it takes a 12-year-old to remind jaded adults of these fundamental, enduring tenets. I hit post, a final, resolute click, and closed my laptop, plunging the room into momentary darkness. Tomorrow, I knew, would undoubtedly usher in new challenges, new battles to be fought. Catherine's looming trial cast a long, ominous shadow. The community remained fractured, a mosaic of lingering resentment and fragile alliances. Some, I understood with a heavy heart, would likely never forgive me for daring to expose the comfortable fictions they had so readily embraced. But tonight, as I clutched the compass, its cool metal a tangible link to a pivotal past, I allowed myself to recall Brian's radiant smile in the courthouse, the pure, unadulterated joy that illuminated his face when the judge, with the gallows' final pronouncement, declared him free. That singular image, that profound moment, made everything, every single agonizing cost, unequivocally worth it. My phone buzzed, a soft vibration against the quiet, a message from Brian. "Made it to Oregon." Dad smiling, real smiling. "Thank you." And then, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, for the first time in months, a genuine, unburdened smile spread across my own face, a real smile.